The galactic trade station Epsilon 7 hummed with the constant buzz of 1,000 different species conducting business across the stars. Massive holographic displays showed commodity prices from dozens of worlds, while translation devices struggled to keep up with the cacophony of alien languages that filled the air. In the center of this cosmic marketplace, a small crowd had gathered around what appeared to be a routine negotiation between a human trader and a Zephyrian merchant. Marcus Chen stood at barely 5 feet 8 inches tall, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he examined a container of rare earth crystals. His cargo ship, the Persistent Dream, was docked just 3 levels below, waiting to transport whatever goods he could secure at a reasonable price. Marcus had been trading in this sector for nearly 15 years, building a reputation for fair deals and reliable delivery despite operating one of the smallest vessels in the independent trader fleet. Across from him loomed Kethvar, a Zephyrian whose species was known throughout the galaxy for their superior intellect and technological advancement. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like liquid mercury, Kethvar represented everything the Galactic Council considered the future of interstellar commerce. His people had mastered faster-than-light travel when humans were still figuring out agriculture, and they never let anyone forget it. The negotiation had been proceeding normally until Marcus questioned the quality of one particular crystal batch. He noticed some impurities that would affect the crystal's use in quantum processors, something that could cause serious problems for his buyers on New Geneva. It was exactly the kind of attention to detail that had kept Marcus in business while flashier traders had come and gone. "I appreciate your offer, Kethvar, but I need to point out these inclusions in Batch 7, Marcus said, holding up a palm-sized crystal to the light. "My buyers use these for sensitive quantum work, and these impurities would cause cascade failures in their processors." The Zephyrian's 4 eyes narrowed, a sign of irritation in his species. Several nearby traders stopped their own conversations to watch. Disputes between humans and the more advanced species were always entertaining, usually ending with the human backing down and accepting whatever terms were offered. "You dare question my expertise, primitive?" Kethvar's voice carried the electronic undertone of his species' natural vocalization. "Your species barely understands the basic principles of quantum mechanics. You cannot possibly detect flaws that our advanced sensors would miss." Marcus remained calm, a skill he had developed through years of dealing with difficult clients. "I'm not questioning your expertise, just pointing out what I can see with my own eyes. These crystals won't meet my buyer's specifications." The crowd grew larger as word spread of the confrontation. Several species known for their gambling habits began placing quiet bets on how quickly the human would capitulate. In their experience, humans always folded when faced with superior alien intellect. Kethvar's skin color shifted to a deeper shade, indicating growing anger. "Perhaps you should return to your backward little world and leave real commerce to species capable of understanding it. Humans are nothing more than clever animals pretending to be civilized. You lack the mental capacity to function in a truly advanced galactic economy." The crowd fell silent. Even by galactic standards, this was an unusual level of public insult. Most species maintained at least a facade of diplomatic courtesy, especially in official trade venues. Several alien traders shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that Kethvar had crossed a line that even their own prejudices wouldn't normally cross. Marcus set the crystal down carefully on the counter between them. His expression remained neutral, but something in his posture changed. The relaxed stance of a patient trader shifted to something more focused, more purposeful. Those who knew humans well enough to read their body language might have recognized it as the calm before a storm. "I see," Marcus said quietly. "And I suppose you believe your species' technological advancement makes you inherently superior to mine." Kethvar's confidence grew, fed by the attention of the crowd and his certainty of intellectual dominance. "It is not a belief, primitive. It is a demonstrable fact. Your species stumbled into space travel barely a century ago. We have been exploring the galaxy for over 10 millennia. You are children playing with toys you do not understand." Several aliens in the crowd made sounds that approximated laughter in their respective species. A few even began recording the exchange, anticipating a viral moment of human humiliation that they could share across the galactic communication networks. Marcus nodded slowly, as if considering the alien's words carefully. "You know, Kethvar, you raise an interesting point about understanding. Tell me, in your 10 millennia of space travel, has your species ever encountered anything that truly challenged your understanding of the universe? The question seemed to catch the Zephyrian off guard. It was not the defensive response he had expected from an insulted human. What do you mean? Well, Marcus continued, his voice remaining conversational. In our brief century of space travel, we've discovered that the universe has a way of humbling anyone who thinks they have it all figured out. I was wondering if your people had learned that lesson yet. Kethvar's 4 arms crossed in a gesture of dismissive superiority. We have mastered quantum physics, bent space-time to our will, and created technologies your species cannot even comprehend. There is nothing the universe can teach us that we have not already learned. The human smiled, and several of the more experienced traders in the crowd felt a sudden chill of premonition. There was something unsettling about that smile, something that suggested Marcus knew something they didn't. That's fascinating, Marcus said, because just last week I delivered a cargo of these exact same crystals to a research station on the edge of the Helix Nebula. The scientists there were working on something they called Project Insight. They needed the crystals for a very specific type of quantum processor, one designed to detect patterns in subspace that conventional sensors miss. Kethvar waved a dismissive hand. Primitive human science. Whatever they think they are accomplishing, it has surely been done better by more advanced species. Perhaps, Marcus agreed. But here's the interesting part. They found something. Something that's been hiding in the quantum foam of subspace for millions of years. Something that your advanced sensors, with all their sophistication, have been missing entirely. The crowd was listening intently now, drawn by the calm confidence in the human's voice. Even Kethvar seemed less certain, his skin color shifting to a more neutral tone. Marcus picked up the flawed crystal again, holding it up to catch the light. You see these inclusions you think are impurities, these specific crystalline structures. They're not random flaws, they're markers, signatures left behind by something that passed through our galaxy long before any of our species achieved sapience. The trading floor fell completely silent. The implications of what the human was suggesting sent ripples of unease through the assembled aliens. If there were traces of ancient intelligence hidden in common trade goods, it meant their understanding of galactic history was fundamentally incomplete. Impossible, Kethvar said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Our archaeologists have mapped the development of intelligence in this galaxy. There were no sapient species before the Eldorans, and they only achieved consciousness 3 million years ago. Marcus nodded respectfully. Your archaeologists are excellent at what they do, but they've been looking for the wrong things. They've been searching for technological remnants, buildings, machines, artifacts. But what if a truly advanced species didn't leave behind technology? What if they left behind something else entirely? The human set the crystal down and began arranging several others in a specific pattern on the counter. The inclusions in each crystal seemed to align in a way that created a larger geometric structure, one that pulsed with a faint inner light when viewed from the correct angle. The research team on Helix Station discovered that these patterns appear in crystals throughout the galaxy, but only in specific locations and only in formations that occur under very precise quantum conditions. The inclusions aren't random, they're a message, a map, instructions left behind by something that wanted to be found, but only by species sophisticated enough to recognize what they were looking at. Kethvar's 4 eyes were fixed on the crystal arrangement, his advanced visual cortex automatically analyzing the patterns Marcus had created. The geometric relationships were indeed complex, following mathematical principles that suggested intelligent design rather than natural formation. Even if such patterns exist, the Zephyrian said slowly, it proves nothing. Convergent evolution could produce similar results across multiple worlds. You're absolutely right to be skeptical, Marcus replied. That's exactly what the research team thought at first, but then they started following the map. The human paused, letting the implications sink in. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, their earlier amusement replaced by intense curiosity. Even the most advanced species in the galaxy were always eager to learn about potential new technologies or discoveries. The pattern points to a specific location in the void between that empty region of space between the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxies, a place where no star has ever formed and no natural phenomenon should exist. But when they sent a probe there using coordinates derived from the crystal patterns, they found something waiting. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, no larger than his palm. It appeared to be made of the same material as the crystals, but its surface was covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living text. This was retrieved from a structure floating in the absolute emptiness of intergalactic space, a structure that defies every known law of physics and engineering. It's not built from matter as we understand it, and it doesn't interact with gravity or electromagnetic radiation in any predictable way. The device in Marcus's hand began to glow softly, responding to his proximity. Several aliens in the crowd stepped back instinctively, their survival instincts recognizing something beyond their understanding. Kethvar's skin had turned pale silver, a sign of deep confusion in his species. What does it do? Marcus smiled again, but this time there was no malice in it, only the quiet satisfaction of someone about to reveal a profound truth. It teaches, but only to those humble enough to admit they don't know everything. Only to those wise enough to recognize that intelligence takes many forms and that technological advancement doesn't automatically confer wisdom or understanding. The human looked directly at the Zephyrian, his expression serious but not unkind. You called my species primitive, Kethvar, said we were clever animals pretending to be civilized. But perhaps the real measure of civilization isn't how advanced your technology is. Perhaps it's how willing you are to learn from others, regardless of how primitive they might appear. The ancient device pulsed once more, and suddenly the air around them filled with a soft harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate through every molecule in the vicinity. The sound was beautiful beyond description, but it carried with it a sense of vast intelligence and patient wisdom that dwarfed even the most advanced galactic civilizations. For just a moment, every being on the trading floor felt connected to something infinitely larger than themselves. They sensed the presence of minds that had contemplated the universe for eons beyond counting, beings who had chosen to preserve their knowledge not in grand monuments or technological marvels, but in humble patterns hidden within common stones. Then the moment passed, and Marcus carefully placed the device back in his jacket. The crystals on the counter had returned to their normal appearance, showing no sign of the profound revelation they had just witnessed. The research team learned something important from their contact with this ancient intelligence, Marcus said into the stunned silence. They learned that wisdom isn't measured by the complexity of your technology or the span of your empire. It's measured by your capacity to recognize truth, regardless of its source. He began packing the crystals back into their container, moving with practiced efficiency. The beings who left these messages weren't interested in proving their superiority. They were interested in sharing knowledge with anyone humble enough to receive it. They understood something that we're all still learning, that intelligence without humility is just sophisticated ignorance. Kethvar stood frozen, his forearms hanging at his sides as he processed what he had just experienced. Everything he thought he knew about galactic history, about the development of intelligence, about his own species' place in the cosmic order, had just been called into question by a human trader with a cargo hold full of apparently ordinary crystals. The other aliens in the crowd began to disperse slowly, each carrying with them questions that would haunt their thoughts for years to come. Some headed directly to their ships, eager to examine their own crystal inventories for signs of the patterns Marcus had demonstrated. Others lingered, hoping to overhear more details about this discovery that threatened to revolutionize their understanding of the universe. Marcus finished packing his purchases and turned to face the Zephyrian one final time. I'll take the full shipment at your original asking price, Kethvar, all batches, including the ones with inclusions. Turns out they're exactly what my buyers need. The alien merchant nodded numbly, his superior attitude completely evaporated. As Marcus prepared to leave with his cargo, Kethvar found his voice again. Human, he called out, the earlier contempt replaced by something approaching respect. This knowledge you speak of, this ancient intelligence, do they still communicate? Can they be contacted directly? Marcus paused at the edge of the crowd, considering his answer carefully. That's the beautiful thing about true wisdom, Kethvar. It's always available to those ready to receive it. The question isn't whether they're still communicating, the question is whether we're finally ready to listen. With that, the human trader walked away, leaving behind a trading floor full of beings who would never again assume that technological advancement was synonymous with true intelligence. The universe, it seemed, still held mysteries that could humble even the most advanced civilizations, and sometimes those mysteries were revealed through the most unlikely of teachers. The news of what had happened on Epsilon 7 spread through galactic communication networks faster than a quantum pulse transmission. Within hours of Marcus Chen's departure, recordings of the encounter had been viewed by billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. The footage showed the same scene from dozens of different angles, captured by alien spectators who had initially gathered to watch a human's humiliation, but instead witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligence and civilization. Dr. Yalanam, the chief archaeologist for the Zephyrian Science Collective, received the priority transmission while conducting a routine dig on the ancient world of Kepler 442b. Her research team had been excavating what they believed to be the oldest known ruins in this sector of the galaxy, carefully cataloging artifacts from the early Eldoran civilization. The work was methodical and predictable, exactly the kind of structured investigation that Zephyrian science prided itself on. When the holographic display materialized in her command tent, showing the trading floor incident, Yalanam's immediate reaction was dismissive. Humans were known for their tendency toward wild speculation and emotional decision-making. They often claimed to have made great discoveries that turned out to be misinterpretations of natural phenomena, or worse, deliberate fabrications designed to inflate their importance in galactic affairs. But as she watched the footage more carefully, focusing on the crystal patterns Marcus had arranged and the device he had produced, her scientific skepticism began to war with her professional curiosity. The geometric relationships were undeniably complex, following mathematical principles that suggested genuine structure rather than random coincidence. More troubling was the harmonic resonance that had been recorded by multiple sensor arrays, a phenomenon that didn't match any known natural or artificial source. "Assistant Krell," she called to her primary research aide, "run a spectral analysis on this audio segment. I want to know if this resonance pattern matches anything in our xenoarchaeological database." The young Zephyrian's 4 hands moved across his control interface with practiced efficiency, his enhanced neural processing allowing him to run complex calculations at speeds that would have impressed even human quantum computers. After several minutes of analysis, he looked up with confusion clearly visible in his posture. "The pattern is completely unprecedented, Dr. Yalanam. It doesn't match any known civilization, but it's definitely artificial in origin. More strange, the harmonic structure suggests a level of quantum manipulation that exceeds our current theoretical capabilities." Yalanam felt the first stirrings of genuine unease. In over 2 decades of archaeological research, she had never encountered evidence of technology that surpassed Zephyrian understanding. Her species had long prided themselves on being the most scientifically advanced civilization in the galaxy, with archaeological records that documented the rise and fall of every major species over the past 4 million years. "Send a priority request to the Central Archive," she instructed. "I want every record we have of crystalline formations with geometric inclusions, particularly in quantum-active minerals. Cross-reference with any unexplained archaeological sites in regions between galaxies." While her team worked, Yalanam found herself studying the human in the footage more carefully. Marcus Chen displayed none of the bombastic behavior typical of his species when they believed they had made an important discovery. Instead, his demeanor was calm, almost professorial, as if he were sharing established knowledge rather than making wild claims. His handling of the ancient device showed familiarity and respect, suggesting extensive prior contact rather than a recent discovery. The implications were deeply disturbing. If humans had indeed made contact with an intelligence older than recorded history, it would overturn fundamental assumptions about galactic development and the progression of civilization. Worse, it would suggest that Zephyrian archaeological methods had somehow missed evidence of this ancient presence despite centuries of comprehensive research. 3 hours later, Assistant Krell returned with results that sent shock waves through the entire research team. The Central Archive had identified over 3,000 instances of crystalline formations matching the patterns shown in the human's demonstration. These formations appeared on worlds throughout the galaxy, always in locations that Zephyrian surveys had classified as archaeologically insignificant due to the lack of technological artifacts or recognizable civilizational markers. Dr. Yalanam, Krell's voice carried the tremor of someone whose entire worldview was being challenged. Many of these sites were dismissed from further investigation because they showed no signs of advanced technology. We classified them as natural formations of no archaeological significance. The senior archaeologist stared at the holographic display showing the distribution of crystal sites across galactic space. The pattern was unmistakable, a vast network spanning thousands of light years, connecting worlds that had never been in direct contact with each other. The mathematical precision of the arrangement suggested intelligent design on a scale that dwarfed the achievements of any known civilization. "Prepare immediate departure for the nearest confirmed site," she ordered, "and send a message to the High Council. We need to dispatch teams to at least 20 of these locations simultaneously. If the humans have discovered something of this magnitude, we cannot allow them to be the sole possessors of such knowledge." Meanwhile, aboard the cargo vessel Persistent Dream, Marcus Chen was having a very different kind of conversation. The ship's communication array crackled with incoming transmissions from across the galaxy research institutions, government agencies, corporate interests, and private collectors, all desperate to learn more about the ancient device and the knowledge it represented. Marcus ignored most of the messages, focusing instead on the encrypted channel that connected him to the research station on the edge of the Helix Nebula. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the human xenoarchaeologist who had first discovered the significance of the crystal patterns, appeared in the holographic display with an expression of concern mixed with anticipation. "Marcus, what exactly did you do on Epsilon 7? We're getting contact requests from every major scientific organization in the galaxy. Half of them are offering ridiculous sums for access to our research, and the other half are demanding information in the name of galactic security." The trader settled into his captain's chair with a weary smile. "I had a conversation with a Zephyrian merchant who thought humans were too primitive to understand advanced concepts. I may have shared some perspective on that assumption." Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. "Marcus, we agreed that this knowledge needed to be shared carefully, with proper preparation and context. The ancient intelligence specifically warned us about the dangers of premature revelation. Some civilizations might not be ready for what we've learned." "I know," Marcus replied, "but sometimes circumstances force your hand. The Zephyrian wasn't just being rude, he was being dangerous. That kind of arrogance, that certainty of superiority, it's exactly the attitude that the Ancient Ones warned us about. Civilizations that believe they know everything stop learning, stop growing, stop adapting." The research station chief rubbed her temples, a gesture that spoke to the magnitude of the situation they now faced. "The cat's out of the bag now. We're going to have to accelerate our timeline significantly. How many of the devices do we have available?" Marcus checked his cargo manifest, his fingers moving across the control interface with practiced ease. 17 functional units, plus another 23 that are partially active. The crystals I just picked up should allow us to activate at least 10 more, assuming the patterns are stable." "That's not nearly enough for proper distribution," Dr. Mitchell said. "We're going to need hundreds of these devices if we want to manage a controlled revelation across all major civilizations, and we still don't fully understand the criteria the ancient intelligence uses to determine readiness." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent proximity alert. Marcus's sensor array had detected multiple ships converging on his position from different vectors: a Zephyrian research vessel, 2 ships from the Andromedan Council, and what appeared to be a human exploration cruiser from the outer colonies. "It looks like I'm about to have company," Marcus said. "Better implement Protocol 7. If this goes badly, we need to make sure the research station remains secure." Dr. Mitchell nodded grimly. Protocol 7 was their emergency contingency plan, designed to protect the most sensitive aspects of their research if outside forces attempted to seize control of the project. The ancient device network had built-in safeguards that would activate if they detected hostile intent or aggressive acquisition attempts. As the approaching ships requested permission to dock or demanded that Marcus heave to for inspection, he found himself thinking about the conversation he had overheard between 2 of the ancient consciousnesses during his last visit to the structure in the void between. They had been discussing the delicate balance between revelation and wisdom, the careful process by which advanced knowledge was shared with younger civilizations. The ancient ones had learned through eons of observation that intelligence and wisdom were not the same thing. Many species could develop sophisticated technology and complex social structures while remaining fundamentally immature in their understanding of the universe and their place within it. The key was identifying those moments when a civilization was ready to take the next step in its development moments that often came through challenge, conflict, or crisis rather than through comfortable academic study. Marcus opened a general communication channel, addressing all the approaching vessels simultaneously. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the independent trader Persistent Dream. I understand you're all interested in the events that occurred on Epsilon 7. I'm willing to discuss those events, but under specific conditions." The responses came in a rapid cascade of different languages and transmission protocols, but the universal translators managed to convert them into coherent demands for immediate cooperation, threats of legal action, and offers of substantial compensation for exclusive access to the information and artifacts in question. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," Marcus continued calmly, "but this situation requires a more thoughtful approach. The knowledge in question isn't something that can be simply downloaded or purchased. It requires preparation, understanding, and most importantly, the right attitude toward learning and discovery." The Zephyrian research vessel moved closer, its advanced scanning arrays focusing on the Persistent Dream's cargo hold. "Human vessel, this is Dr. Yalanam of the Science Collective. We have authority to investigate any claims of significant archaeological discovery. You will submit to inspection and surrender any artifacts of potential galactic importance." Marcus smiled, recognizing the same attitude of assumed superiority that had gotten Kethvar into trouble on the trading station. "Dr. Yalanam, I'm familiar with your work on early Eldoran civilization. Your excavation of the Kepler sites showed impressive attention to detail and methodological rigor. But I'm curious, in all your years of research, have you ever encountered anything that completely challenged your fundamental assumptions about galactic history?" The question seemed to catch the archaeologist off guard. Through the communication link, Marcus could hear discussions in the background as the Zephyrian crew consulted their databases and discussed response strategies. "Archaeological science proceeds through careful analysis of evidence," Dr. Yalanam replied. "We do not base our conclusions on assumptions, but on verifiable data." "An admirable approach," Marcus agreed. "But what happens when you encounter evidence that suggests your existing data is incomplete? Evidence that indicates entire categories of phenomena that your detection methods weren't designed to recognize." As he spoke, Marcus was carefully manipulating the ancient device he carried, activating specific pattern sequences that would enable it to interface with the crystal formations in his cargo hold. The harmonic resonance began to build slowly, just at the edge of detection for the sensors on the approaching ships. The effect was subtle but unmistakable. Each vessel's scanning arrays began to register anomalous readings from the Persistent Dream's cargo bay. The crystals were responding to the device's activation, their internal structures shifting to reveal the geometric patterns that had been hidden within their seemingly random inclusions. On board the Zephyrian research vessel, Assistant Krell's voice rose in excitement as he analyzed the incoming data. "Dr. Yalanam, the cargo bay is showing massive quantum coherence effects. The crystalline structures are reorganizing themselves into complex geometric patterns. This is unlike anything in our scientific database." The human exploration cruiser from the outer colonies transmitted on a priority channel. "Captain Chen, this is Admiral Sarah Rodriguez of the Colonial Survey Fleet. We've been monitoring reports of your discovery. As a representative of human interests in this sector, I need to know the full scope of what we're dealing with." Marcus felt a moment of pride at hearing another human voice in this tense situation, but he also recognized the potential danger. If this situation devolved into a competition between species for exclusive access to the ancient knowledge, it would violate everything the intelligence in the void between had tried to teach them about cooperation and shared understanding. "Admiral Rodriguez, Dr. Yalanam, honored delegates from the Andromeden Council," he said, addressing all the vessels simultaneously. "What we're dealing with here is bigger than any single species or government. This knowledge belongs to all of us, but it can only be received by those who approach it with the right mindset. The ancient device in his hand pulsed with increasing intensity, and suddenly the space around the 5 ships was filled with the same harmonic resonance that had stunned the crowd on Epsilon 7. But this time, the effect was magnified by the presence of hundreds of activated crystals in Marcus's cargo hold, creating a symphony of quantum harmonics that resonated through the very fabric of space-time. For a moment that seemed to last forever, every being on every ship felt the presence of the ancient intelligence. They sensed vast minds that had contemplated the mysteries of existence for eons beyond counting, beings who had watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations while patiently waiting for the galaxy to mature enough to receive their ultimate gift, the knowledge of true unity and understanding. When the resonance faded, the space around the 5 ships had been fundamentally altered. The background radiation showed new patterns, quantum structures that hadn't existed moments before. Each vessel's sensors registered the same impossible reading. They were no longer in normal space, but in some kind of dimensional pocket that existed outside the normal flow of time and physics. "Welcome," Marcus said softly, "to the first lesson." The dimensional pocket that surrounded the 5 ships was unlike anything in galactic scientific literature. Sensor readings showed impossible values spacetime that curved in directions that didn't exist, energy patterns that defied the fundamental laws of physics, and a background harmonic that suggested the presence of conscious manipulation on a cosmic scale. The various crews found themselves staring at instrument displays that reported data their minds could barely process. Dr. Yalanam's scientific training warred with the evidence before her eyes. Every principle of Zephyrian physics declared that what she was observing was impossible, yet her instruments continued to register readings that challenged the very foundations of her understanding. The crystalline patterns visible through the persistent Dream's cargo bay windows were now glowing with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the ambient harmonic resonance. "Assistant Krell," she said, her voice tight with the strain of maintaining professional composure, "are our life support systems functioning normally?" The young researcher checked his displays twice before responding. "All systems are operating within normal parameters, Dr. Yalanam. But according to our chronometers, time outside this space is flowing at approximately 1/10 normal rate. If these readings are accurate, we could spend hours here while only minutes pass in normal space-time." Admiral Rodriguez aboard the human exploration cruiser was having similar conversations with her crew. The colonial survey fleet had encountered strange phenomena during their exploration of the galactic rim, but nothing that compared to their current situation. Her science officer, Commander Park, was running diagnostic after diagnostic, unable to accept that their instruments were functioning correctly. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies, but we're not experiencing any corresponding tidal effects," Commander Park reported. "It's as if the fundamental constants of physics have been locally modified to prevent damage to our vessels." Through the communication link, Marcus's voice remained calm and reassuring. "What you're experiencing is a teaching space, created by the ancient intelligence to allow safe contact with younger civilizations. The physics here have been adjusted to accommodate the limitations of our technology and biology." The Andromedan Council vessel transmitted a series of complex mathematical queries, their silicon-based thought processes attempting to analyze the situation through pure logic and calculation. The response came not from Marcus, but from the harmonic resonance itself, patterns of sound and vibration that somehow conveyed mathematical concepts directly to their consciousness. For the first time in their species' history, the Andromedans found themselves receiving information through non-logical channels. The experience was profoundly unsettling for beings who had evolved to process reality through pure mathematical analysis. Yet the knowledge being transmitted was undeniably accurate and comprehensive, describing principles of physics and consciousness that their greatest theorists had never imagined. Marcus activated another sequence on the ancient device, and suddenly the interior of each ship was filled with gentle, shifting patterns of light. The illumination carried no heat and cast no shadows, but it somehow made everything more visible, more clear, as if the light itself was enhancing their ability to perceive and understand their surroundings. "The Ancient Ones left many messages throughout the galaxy," Marcus said, his voice now carrying subtle harmonics that helped the various species understand his meaning, despite their different communication methods. But their most important message is not contained in any device or crystal formation. It's contained in the process of discovery itself. Dr. Yalanam found herself drawn to the viewport, watching as the patterns of light outside their ships began to coalesce into recognizable forms. She saw civilizations rising and falling across vast spans of time, species achieving great technological advancement only to destroy themselves through war, environmental catastrophe, or simple failure to adapt to changing conditions. "How many?" she whispered, not really intending the question for anyone else. But somehow Marcus heard her, or perhaps the ancient intelligence itself responded through him. "Thousands, tens of thousands, each civilization convinced of their own superiority, each certain that their path was the only correct one. Some achieved remarkable heights of technology and knowledge, but very few achieved true wisdom." The light patterns shifted, showing the rise of species that the Zephyrian archaeological record had never discovered. Civilizations that had mastered technologies beyond current galactic understanding, but had ultimately failed to transcend the limitations of their own perspectives. They had built vast empires that spanned multiple star systems, had developed sciences that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, had even learned to travel between dimensions. But they had never learned to truly cooperate, to share knowledge without seeking dominance, to value wisdom over power. Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward in her command chair, studying the historical displays with the tactical awareness of a seasoned military officer. These civilizations had technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive. What happened to them? War, environmental collapse. "Something worse," Marcus replied. "Stagnation. They became so convinced of their own superiority that they stopped learning, stopped growing, stopped adapting. They achieved what they thought was perfection and then discovered that perfection is another word for death." The patterns around them shifted again, showing a different kind of civilization beings who appeared less technologically advanced, but who demonstrated something the previous examples had lacked. These societies showed evidence of true cooperation, not just within their own species, but with others they encountered. They shared knowledge freely, learned from their mistakes, and remained humble in the face of the universe's mysteries. A few species managed to transcend the trap of assumed superiority, the harmonic voice continued, though whether it came from Marcus or directly from the ancient intelligence was becoming difficult to determine. They learned that true advancement comes not from accumulating power or knowledge, but from developing the wisdom to use both responsibly. Commander Park's voice crackled through the communication system from the human exploration cruiser. "Captain Chen, these historical records show levels of cooperation that our current galactic civilizations have never achieved. How is that possible? Our species can barely maintain peaceful trade relationships, let alone true collaboration." The answer came not in words, but in direct experience. Suddenly, each being on every ship found themselves connected to the thoughts and feelings of every other being in the dimensional pocket. Dr. Yalanam could sense Admiral Rodriguez's tactical concerns and her genuine desire to protect humanity while avoiding unnecessary conflict. The Andromedan silicon mines experienced the emotional resonance of biological consciousness for the first time in their existence. The human crews felt the vast, patient intelligence of the Zephyrian researchers and the crystalline logic of the Andromedan thought processes. The connection lasted only moments, but its impact was profound. For the first time, each species experienced reality from the perspective of the others. They felt the fears, hopes, and aspirations that drove different forms of consciousness, and they recognized the fundamental commonality that underlied all sapient existence. When the connection faded, the silence that followed was heavy with revelation. Each crew member found themselves looking at their instruments with new understanding, recognizing that their technology was not just a tool for analysis, but a medium for connection, a way of reaching across the vast distances that separated different forms of life and consciousness. Dr. Yalanam was the first to break the silence. "The archaeological record? We've been interpreting it wrong. We've been looking for evidence of technological advancement, but we should have been looking for evidence of cooperative development. The most successful civilizations weren't the ones with the most powerful weapons or the fastest ships, they were the ones who learned to work together." Admiral Rodriguez nodded slowly, her military training providing a new perspective on the historical patterns they had witnessed. The civilizations that survived and thrived were the ones who developed what we would call strong alliance structures. They didn't conquer or absorb other species. They integrated with them, learned from them, grew stronger through cooperation rather than dominance. The Andromedan vessel transmitted a complex series of equations, but this time the mathematics carried emotional undertones that reflected their newfound appreciation for non-logical forms of understanding. Their calculations showed optimization curves that peaked not when individual capabilities were maximized, but when collective cooperation reached critical thresholds. Marcus felt the ancient device in his hand growing warm, its crystalline structure beginning to resonate with harmonics that seemed to come from the fabric of space-time itself. The intelligence in the void between was preparing for the next phase of the lesson, but first it needed to ensure that its students were ready to receive what it had to offer. "What you've experienced so far is just the beginning," Marcus said, his voice now clearly serving as a conduit for the ancient consciousness. "The real knowledge, the true wisdom that we're prepared to share, requires a level of commitment that goes beyond individual or species-based interests. It requires you to make a choice about what kind of civilization you want to help create." The light patterns around them shifted once more, but this time they showed not historical records but potential futures. The observers saw branching timelines that represented the possible development paths for galactic civilization based on different choices and approaches. Some timelines led to unprecedented cooperation and shared prosperity across hundreds of species and thousands of worlds. Others led to escalating conflicts, resource depletion, and eventually the collapse of galactic civilization itself. "The knowledge we offer can accelerate your development by thousands of years," the voice continued. "Technologies that will seem like magic compared to your current capabilities, understanding of physics and consciousness that will revolutionize your sciences, and wisdom traditions that will help you navigate the challenges of true galactic unity. But this knowledge comes with responsibility." Dr. Yalanam studied the branching timelines, her archaeological training helping her recognize the patterns that distinguished successful development paths from failed ones. The successful timelines all show species working together, sharing resources and knowledge rather than competing for advantage. But that level of cooperation would require fundamental changes in how our governments and institutions operate. "More than that," Admiral Rodriguez added, "it would require changes in how we think about ourselves and our place in the galaxy. Military doctrine is based on identifying and neutralizing threats, but these timelines suggest that our greatest threat is our own tendency toward isolation and competition." The Andromedan equations grew more complex, incorporating variables that represented trust, cooperation, and shared identity across species lines. Their calculations suggested that achieving the level of unity shown in the successful timelines would require unprecedented levels of transparency and mutual vulnerability among civilizations that had spent millennia maintaining careful boundaries and defensive postures. "The choice before you is simple in concept but difficult in practice," Marcus said, the ancient device now pulsing with rhythms that seemed to synchronize with the heartbeats and thought patterns of every being present. "You can return to your normal spacetime with some knowledge and a few devices, maintaining your current competitive relationships while making incremental progress toward better cooperation. Or you can commit to the deeper path, true integration of your civilization's knowledge and capabilities in service of galactic unity." The implications of the choice were staggering. It meant more than just sharing technology or establishing better trade relationships. It meant fundamentally restructuring the basic assumptions that had guided galactic civilization for millions of years, moving from a model based on individual species advancement to one based on collective development and shared destiny. "What guarantee do we have?" Dr. Yalanam asked. "How do we know that other species will honor such a commitment? How do we prevent one civilization from using shared knowledge to gain advantage over others?" The answer came in the form of direct demonstration. The ancient device projected a field around all 5 ships that made deception impossible. For several minutes, every thought, every intention, every hidden agenda was visible to everyone else. The crews experienced complete transparency, not just of information, but of motivation and purpose. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. The Zephyrian scientists' genuine desire for knowledge was clearly visible, but so was their underlying assumption of intellectual superiority. The human military's protective instincts were apparent, along with their fear that other species might use advanced technology against humanity. The Andromedan logic systems revealed their struggle to incorporate emotional and intuitive factors into their decision-making processes. But alongside the fears and biases, something else was visible, a shared recognition that the current path of galactic development was ultimately unsustainable. Each species could see in the others the same desire for growth, security, and meaning that motivated their own actions. They could see past the surface differences to the common foundation of consciousness that connected all sapient life. When the field of transparency faded, the silence was different, not awkward or uncertain, but contemplative. Each crew had experienced firsthand what true cooperation would require, and they were grappling with the magnitude of the transformation that would be necessary. "The choice is yours," Marcus said softly. "But it must be made now, while you're still connected to this teaching space. Once you return to normal space-time, the clarity of this experience will fade, and the old patterns of thought and behavior will reassert themselves." The harmonic resonance began to shift, indicating that the dimensional pocket was preparing to release them back to normal space. Each ship would soon have to decide whether to accept the ancient intelligence's offer of deeper knowledge and cooperation, or to return to the familiar but ultimately limited path of competitive development. The future of galactic civilization hung in the balance of their choice. The moment of decision stretched through the dimensional pocket like a held breath. Each ship's crew found themselves confronting not just the immediate choice before them, but the entire trajectory of their civilization's development. The weight of potential futures pressed against their consciousness, made more real by the transparent sharing they had just experienced. Dr. Yalanam stood at the center of her vessel's command deck, her forearms gesturing as she communicated rapidly with the Zephyrian Science Collective through quantum-encrypted channels. The conversation was heated, with voices from across Zephyrian space offering conflicting opinions about the unprecedented situation. Some demanded immediate seizure of the technology and withdrawal from any cooperative agreements. Others argued for cautious engagement. A few visionary voices called for full commitment to the path the ancient intelligence had revealed. "Dr. Yalanam," her communications officer reported, "the High Council is ordering immediate return to Zephyrian space with all recovered technology and data. They consider this a matter of species security." Chief Archaeologist stared at the communication display, feeling the familiar weight of institutional authority. For her entire career, she had followed protocols, respected hierarchies, and trusted in the wisdom of collective Zephyrian decision-making. But the experience of true transparency had shown her something that challenged those loyalties. She had seen the fear and paranoia that motivated some of her people's leaders, the same attitudes that had driven countless civilizations to stagnation and decline. "Tell the High Council that I am following the highest protocols of scientific investigation," she replied carefully. "I am gathering data that may reshape our understanding of galactic development. Full analysis is required before any conclusions can be drawn." Admiral Rodriguez was facing her own institutional pressures. The Colonial Fleet Command was demanding immediate tactical assessment of the alien technologies and their potential military applications. Her secure channels crackled with orders to secure exclusive human access to the ancient knowledge and to prevent other species from gaining strategic advantages. "Admiral," her tactical officer said quietly, "Fleet Command is expressing concern about the security implications of shared alien technology. They're requesting that we classify this entire incident under protection protocols." Rodriguez found herself thinking about the transparency field they had all experienced, remembering the moment when she had felt the genuine peaceful intentions of the Zephyrian scientists and the logical, non-aggressive nature of the Andromedan consciousness. The fear and suspicion in her superior's voices seemed suddenly primitive, a relic of an earlier stage of human development. "Commander Park," she said, "prepare a full sensor log of everything we've witnessed. I want complete documentation of the cooperative potential we've observed. Whatever decision we make here, it needs to be based on all available data, not just tactical considerations." The Andromedan vessel was experiencing its own version of institutional conflict. Their silicon-based collective consciousness was processing thousands of logical arguments simultaneously, creating complex decision trees that analyzed every possible outcome of cooperation versus isolation. But the emotional resonance they had experienced during the transparency field had introduced variables that their purely logical systems struggled to quantify. Their transmitted equations grew increasingly complex as they attempted to incorporate the non-logical factors they had discovered. Trust, hope, fear, and aspiration defied their mathematical models, yet the evidence clearly showed that these factors played crucial roles in determining civilizational outcomes. Marcus felt the ancient device growing warm in his hand as the intelligence in the void between prepared for the final phase of the lesson. Through the device's connection, he could sense the vast patience of minds that had waited millions of years for this moment. The first time in galactic history when multiple species had simultaneously been offered the choice between competitive isolation and true cooperative development. The Ancient Ones have watched this choice play out across the galaxy many times, Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of eons of observation. Most species choose the familiar path of competition and gradual development. A few choose isolation, withdrawing from galactic civilization entirely. Very rarely, individual species have chosen the cooperative path, but never before have multiple species had the opportunity to make that choice together. The light patterns around them shifted to show specific historical examples. They watched civilizations that had achieved remarkable technological advancement through cooperative development, species that had learned to integrate their different strengths and perspectives to solve problems that no single civilization could have addressed alone. But they also saw the tragic ends of those experiments, species that had achieved unprecedented cooperation, only to be overwhelmed by more aggressive neighbors who saw their openness as weakness. The difference this time, Marcus continued, is scale. You represent the three most influential civilizational models in this galaxy: human adaptability and innovation, Zephyrian scientific rigor and knowledge preservation, and Andromedan logical analysis and computational power. If you commit to true cooperation, you create a foundation that other species can join, building toward the critical mass necessary for permanent transformation. Dr. Yalanam closed her communication channel with the High Council, her decision crystallizing as she realized that this moment represented exactly the kind of archaeological significance she had devoted her life to understanding. She was witnessing the potential birth of a new phase of galactic civilization, a transition as significant as the development of faster-than-light travel or the establishment of the first interspecies trade networks. "Assistant Krell," she said quietly, "record my personal log. Today we have encountered evidence of intelligence that predates known galactic civilization by millions of years. This intelligence has offered knowledge that could accelerate our development beyond our current imagination. The choice we make in the next few minutes will determine whether future archaeologists will study this day as the beginning of a new golden age, or as another example of civilizational failure due to fear and short-sightedness." Admiral Rodriguez found herself thinking about her oath as an officer, to protect humanity and preserve human interests. But the transparency experience had expanded her understanding of what those interests truly were. Humanity's long-term survival and prosperity depended not on military superiority or technological dominance, but on building relationships with other species that could weather the challenges that no single civilization could face alone. "All hands," she announced over the ship's communication system, "prepare for historic documentation protocols. We are about to participate in a decision that will affect the future development of galactic civilization. Whatever choice we make, I want complete records for future generations to understand the moment when everything changed." The Andromedan vessel suddenly transmitted a breakthrough equation, a mathematical model that successfully incorporated emotional and intuitive variables alongside logical ones. Their calculations showed that cooperative development paths produced exponentially better outcomes than competitive ones, even when accounting for the risks of shared vulnerability and the challenges of integrating different species approaches to problem-solving. The harmonic resonance around them began to intensify, indicating that the dimensional pocket was approaching the limits of its stability. The ancient intelligence needed their decision soon, or the opportunity would be lost for another cycle of galactic development. Marcus activated a final sequence on the device, and suddenly each ship was connected not just to the others in their small group, but to the vast network of consciousness that spanned the space between galaxies. For a moment that felt like eternity, they touched the minds of the Ancient Ones themselves, beings so advanced that their individual thoughts could reshape matter at the quantum level. yet so wise that they had chosen to preserve and share knowledge rather than using it for dominance or control. The ancient consciousness was vast beyond comprehension, yet remarkably gentle in its interaction with the younger minds. It shared not just knowledge, but understanding, the deep wisdom that came from having observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, from having learned through eons of experience that true power lay not in the ability to control others, but in the capacity to inspire growth and cooperation. Through that connection, each crew member experienced a vision of what galactic civilization could become. They saw worlds where different species collaborated so seamlessly that the boundaries between them became meaningless. They witnessed scientific breakthroughs that emerged from combining human intuition with Zephyrian methodology and Andromedan computational power. They observed conflicts being resolved not through force or dominance, but through genuine understanding and creative problem-solving. They also felt the profound loneliness of the ancient intelligence beings who had achieved everything they had once thought they wanted, only to discover that achievement without companionship was hollow. The ancient ones had transcended every physical limitation, had mastered technologies that could reshape reality itself, but they had learned too late that wisdom shared was infinitely more valuable than knowledge hoarded. When the connection faded, Dr. Yalanam was the first to speak. "I commit my vessel and my scientific authority to the cooperative path. The knowledge we could gain through shared development far exceeds what any single species could achieve alone." Admiral Rodriguez nodded firmly. "The Colonial Survey Fleet hereby commits to full cooperation with allied species in developing and implementing ancient knowledge protocols. This is bigger than any single government or military organization." The Andromedan equations that followed were the most beautiful mathematical expressions any of them had ever encountered, complex formulas that somehow conveyed not just logical commitment, but emotional dedication to the cooperative path. Their silicon minds had successfully integrated the non-logical variables they had discovered, creating a new form of consciousness that combined computational power with something approaching what biological species would call hope. The ancient device in Marcus's hand pulsed with brilliant light, and suddenly the dimensional pocket was filled with harmonic resonances of celebration. The intelligence in the void between was expressing something that could only be called joy. The first time in millions of years that multiple species had simultaneously chosen the path of true cooperation. Knowledge began flowing into their ship's databases, not the raw data they had expected, but integrated understanding that adapted itself to each species' learning methods. The Zephyrians received scientific principles presented through familiar archaeological and methodological frameworks. The humans gained access to technologies and strategies that built naturally on their existing military and exploration capabilities. The Andromedans found mathematical models that elegantly incorporated the emotional and intuitive variables they had struggled to quantify. But the most profound gift was the communication protocols that would allow them to maintain the transparency and understanding they had experienced in the dimensional pocket. Each ship received modified versions of the ancient devices that would enable direct mind-to-mind connection across species lines, not for control or invasion, but for genuine sharing of knowledge and perspective. "This is only the beginning," Marcus said as the dimensional pocket began to fade around them. "What you've received today is the foundation for cooperative development. The real work begins when you return to normal space and start implementing these principles with your own civilizations." Dr. Yalanam looked at her instruments as normal space-time reasserted itself around them. The crystal formations in Marcus's cargo hold were still glowing, but the light was different now, warmer, more inviting, as if the ancient intelligence had awakened something within them that had been dormant for eons. "My people will not easily accept this change," she admitted. "There will be those who see cooperation as weakness, who believe that Zephyrian advancement requires maintaining superiority over other species." "Same with humanity," Admiral Rodriguez agreed. "Military doctrine, corporate interests, and political structures are all based on competitive advantage. We're talking about fundamentally restructuring how our entire civilization operates." The Andromedan response came in the form of elegant equations that acknowledged the challenges while demonstrating mathematical certainty that the long-term benefits would far exceed the short-term costs. Their computational analysis suggested specific strategies for managing the transition period and building support for cooperative development among their respective populations. The Ancient Ones faced the same resistance when they first attempted this transformation, Marcus replied. That's why they built the teaching spaces and developed gradual revelation protocols. Change of this magnitude takes time, but once it reaches critical mass, it becomes self-sustaining. As normal space fully reasserted itself around them, each ship found their navigation systems had been subtly modified. Their star charts now included previously unknown coordinates, locations throughout the galaxy where other teaching spaces could be accessed. Other species could be introduced to the cooperative development path, and the network of awakened civilizations could gradually expand. The work of transforming galactic civilization had begun, sparked by one human trader's refusal to accept an alien's insult about humanity's capabilities. What had started as a simple commercial dispute on a trading station had become the catalyst for the greatest change in galactic history. But as the 5 ships prepared to return to their respective territories, each crew knew that the real challenge lay ahead. They had experienced a vision of what cooperation could achieve, but now they had to convince entire civilizations to abandon the competitive paradigms that had defined galactic politics for millions of years. The ancient intelligence had given them the tools and knowledge they needed. Whether they could use those gifts to build a better future remained to be seen. 2 years had passed since the encounter in the dimensional pocket, and the galaxy was experiencing the most profound transformation in recorded history. What had begun as a simple insult between a human trader and an arrogant Zephyrian merchant had evolved into a movement that was reshaping the fundamental nature of interstellar civilization. The Cooperative Development Initiative, as it had come to be known, now included 17 major species and over 300 worlds. The initial triumvirate of humans, Zephyrians, and Andromedans had proven to the galaxy that true collaboration was possible, and their combined achievements had convinced even the most skeptical observers that cooperation produced better results than competition. Dr. Yalanam stood in the newest facility on New Geneva, a research complex that embodied everything the ancient intelligence had tried to teach them about cooperative development. The building itself was a marvel of integrated architecture, incorporating Zephyrian archaeological precision, human adaptive engineering, and Andromedan computational optimization. But more impressive than the physical structure was the work being conducted within its walls. In the main laboratory, teams of mixed-species researchers worked side by side on projects that no single civilization could have imagined. Zephyrian scientists used their methodical approach to catalog and analyze the thousands of crystal sites that had been discovered throughout the galaxy. Human engineers adapted the ancient technologies to modern applications, creating devices that enhanced communication, transportation, and resource management. Andromedan computational specialists developed the mathematical models necessary to optimize these systems across multiple worlds and species. Dr. Yalanam, called Assistant Krell, who had become one of the most effective advocates for cooperative research methods among young Zephyrian scientists. The results from the Centauri excavation are remarkable. The team there has found evidence of cooperative settlements that predate our earliest historical records by almost 1,000,000 years. The senior archaeologist moved to examine the holographic displays showing the latest findings. The Centauri site revealed something unprecedented archaeological evidence of multiple species living and working together in the distant past, using technologies that combined different approaches to problem-solving in ways that were only now being rediscovered through the Cooperative Development Initiative. "It appears," she said wonderingly, "that we're not creating something new, but rediscovering something that existed long ago. The galaxy has experienced periods of true cooperation before, though the records of those times were lost or ignored by later civilizations that had reverted to competitive models." Admiral Rodriguez arrived at the facility that afternoon, her exploration cruiser docking at the station that now served as headquarters for the expanding network of cooperative worlds. Her mission had taken her to the furthest reaches of known space, where she had encountered 3 previously unknown species and successfully introduced them to the ancient intelligence's teachings. "The crystalline entities from the Magellanic Clouds have agreed to join the initiative," she reported during the daily coordination meeting that connected research facilities across dozens of worlds. "Their silicon-based consciousness integrates beautifully with Andromedan logical processing. But they also demonstrate something we haven't seen before: collective emotional response that enhances rather than conflicts with rational analysis. The meeting included participants from across the galaxy, their images projected through the quantum communication networks that had been enhanced with ancient technology. Marcus Chen appeared from his current position near the galactic core, where he was working with a team of xenoarchaeologists to investigate the oldest crystal sites. Dr. Sarah Mitchell connected from the Helix Nebula Research Station, which had become the primary center for direct communication with the ancient intelligence. "The Ancient Ones are pleased with our progress," Dr. Mitchell reported, "but they've warned us about a critical juncture approaching. Our success is attracting attention from civilizations that see cooperation as a threat to their power structures. We may soon face organized resistance from species that prefer the old competitive model." This had always been anticipated as a possibility. Not every civilization would welcome the transformation that cooperation represented. Species that had built their power on technological superiority, military dominance, or economic exploitation would naturally resist changes that threatened their advantages. Marcus nodded grimly. "I've been tracking ship movements in the outer sectors. The hegemony has been building a coalition of species that reject the cooperative model. They're calling it the Sovereignty Alliance, and they've been spreading propaganda about the dangers of sharing technology and knowledge across species lines." The hegemony was a militaristic confederation that had dominated their region of space through aggressive expansion and technological superiority. Their leaders had repeatedly refused invitations to participate in cooperative development, viewing it as a weakness that could be exploited. Now, faced with the growing success of the initiative, they were apparently preparing to take more direct action. "Our intelligence suggests they're planning something significant," Admiral Rodriguez added. "Fleet movements indicate a possible coordinated strike against key initiative facilities. They may be planning to capture ancient technology and use it to enhance their own military capabilities." Dr. Yalanam felt a familiar chill as she remembered the historical patterns they had observed in the ancient records. This was exactly how previous attempts at galactic cooperation had failed: external pressure from aggressive civilizations that saw collaboration as vulnerability rather than strength. "The Ancient Ones faced this same challenge," she said thoughtfully. "In every previous cycle, cooperative civilizations have been disrupted by more aggressive neighbors. But we have advantages that previous attempts lacked. We have larger numbers, better integration of different species capabilities, and direct guidance from the ancient intelligence." The Andromedan representatives' mathematical projections appeared on the shared display, showing probability curves for various conflict scenarios. Their calculations suggested that direct military confrontation would likely result in the destruction of both cooperative and aggressive civilizations, repeating the cycle of galactic setback that had occurred multiple times throughout history. "However," the elegant equations continued, "there exists a solution pathway that previous civilizations did not have access to. The ancient intelligence has indicated willingness to take a more direct role in protecting cooperative development, but only if we demonstrate that we understand the true meaning of the knowledge we've received." Dr. Mitchell leaned forward from her position at the research station. "That's correct. The Ancient Ones have been preparing for this moment for millions of years. They have capabilities that could easily neutralize any military threat, but they will only use them if we prove that we've learned the deeper lessons about the nature of power and responsibility." Marcus felt the ancient device in his jacket pulse gently, responding to the discussion with harmonic patterns that conveyed both warning and reassurance. "The test isn't about our ability to fight back against aggression. It's about our ability to transcend the cycle of conflict entirely. We have to find a way to deal with the Sovereignty Alliance that doesn't involve defeating them, but transforming them." This was the ultimate challenge that had defeated every previous attempt at galactic cooperation. How do you deal with civilizations that are fundamentally committed to dominance and competition? Military victory would simply perpetuate the cycle of conflict. Isolation would leave aggressive species free to attack other potential cooperative civilizations. The only solution was to find a way to change their fundamental approach to existence, but that required a level of wisdom and capability that younger civilizations had never possessed. "The Ancient Ones have been patient teachers," Admiral Rodriguez observed, "but they're also strategic thinkers who have been planning for this scenario for millions of years. They wouldn't have guided us this far without having a solution to the aggression problem. Dr. Yalanam accessed the archaeological databases that now contained information from hundreds of crystal sites across the galaxy. The patterns were becoming clearer as more data was collected. The ancient intelligence hadn't just left teaching devices and communication networks. They had left something else, something that had remained dormant until sufficient numbers of species achieved true cooperation. The galaxy itself is the ultimate teaching device, she said as understanding dawned. The crystal networks, the dimensional pockets, the consciousness enhancement technologies, they're all part of a larger system that the Ancient Ones built into the fundamental structure of galactic spacetime. Marcus felt the device pulse more strongly, and suddenly he was receiving information directly from the ancient intelligence, not just knowledge, but understanding of a plan that had been millions of years in the making. The cooperative civilizations weren't just participants in galactic transformation. They were the activation key for systems that the Ancient Ones had embedded throughout local space. When sufficient numbers of species achieve true cooperation and demonstrate wisdom in the use of advanced knowledge, he said, speaking the words as he received them, the galaxy itself becomes a teaching space. Not just small dimensional pockets, but transformation fields that encompass entire star systems. The implications were staggering. The ancient intelligence had literally prepared the galaxy itself to serve as a consciousness enhancement environment. When activated, it would create conditions that made cooperation and understanding the natural state of existence, while making aggression and dominance functionally impossible to maintain. But activation requires unanimous consent from all participating cooperative species, Dr. Mitchell added, her connection to the research station allowing her to receive additional details. The Ancient Ones will not impose this transformation without absolute certainty that we understand its implications. Once activated, there's no returning to the old competitive model. The galaxy becomes permanently oriented toward cooperative development. The decision before them was even more momentous than the choice they had faced in the original dimensional pocket. They were being offered the chance to permanently transform galactic civilization, but at the cost of forever eliminating the possibility of return to competitive models. Species that refused the transformation would not be destroyed, but they would find it increasingly difficult to maintain aggressive postures in an environment that naturally promoted cooperation and understanding. Admiral Rodriguez considered the tactical implications. The Sovereignty Alliance would lose their fundamental power base. Their entire civilization is built on military dominance and competitive advantage. If those approaches become impossible to sustain, they'll either have to adapt to cooperation or isolate themselves in increasingly small pockets of space. It's not conquest, Dr. Yalanam realized. It's evolution. The Ancient Ones are offering to help us take the next step in galactic development, the transition from competitive to truly cooperative civilization. The species that refuse will eventually adapt or become irrelevant, but not through force or domination. The Andromedan calculations showed probability curves reaching unprecedented levels of certainty. Their mathematical models indicated that galactic transformation would produce benefits beyond their ability to fully compute advances in science, technology, and consciousness that would propel all participating species toward achievements that individual civilizations could never reach. Marcus felt the ancient device reaching full activation, connecting him not just to the intelligence in the void between, but to the vast network of consciousness enhancement systems that had been dormant throughout the galaxy for millions of years. Through that connection, he could sense the readiness of hundreds of worlds, thousands of species, and billions of individual consciousnesses that had been prepared for this moment. The question, he said softly, is whether we're ready to leave childhood behind and accept the responsibilities of galactic adulthood. The Ancient Ones can give us the tools, but we have to choose to use them wisely. Dr. Yalanam looked around the laboratory where species that had been strangers 2 years ago now worked together as naturally as members of the same family. The transformation they had already achieved seemed miraculous compared to the competitive chaos that had characterized galactic civilization for millions of years. "Look what we've accomplished already," she said. 17 species working together more effectively than any single civilization has ever functioned alone. If we can do this much with just the basic teachings, imagine what becomes possible when the entire galaxy is oriented toward cooperation. Admiral Rodriguez nodded slowly. The military implications alone are revolutionary. Instead of different species building weapons to use against each other, we could integrate our defensive capabilities to protect against threats that no single civilization could handle: cosmic disasters, extragalactic invasions, or the kind of stagnation that destroyed previous civilizations. The vote, when it came, was unanimous across all participating species and worlds. Every civilization that had experienced the benefits of cooperative development chose to commit to permanent transformation. They understood that they were not just changing their own societies, but taking responsibility for guiding galactic civilization toward a future that transcended the limitations that had trapped countless previous attempts at advancement. Marcus activated the final sequence on the ancient device, and suddenly the research facility was filled with harmonic resonances that seemed to come from the stars themselves. Throughout the galaxy, similar harmonics began emerging from crystal sites, ancient ruins, and dimensional pockets that had waited eons for this moment. The transformation was gentle but undeniable. Space-time itself began to resonate with frequencies that enhanced cooperation and understanding, while making aggression and dominance increasingly difficult to sustain. The change would take months to reach every corner of the galaxy, but once complete, it would represent the most significant evolutionary leap in galactic history. As the harmonics faded, Dr. Yalanam felt a profound sense of completion. The insult that had sparked this entire transformation, Kethvar's arrogant dismissal of human intelligence, seemed like a moment from ancient history. Yet without that moment of conflict, without Marcus's refusal to accept assumptions of inferiority, none of this would have been possible. "You know," she said to Marcus, as they watched the first effects of galactic transformation beginning to manifest in the quantum resonance patterns outside the facility, "that Zephyrian merchant on Epsilon 7 may have done the galaxy the greatest service in its history. His insult set in motion the events that led to the greatest advancement in galactic civilization." Marcus smiled, remembering the shock on Kethvar's face when he realized that his assumptions about human capabilities were not just wrong, but dangerously limiting. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the most unlikely sources. The ancient ones understood that. That's why they hid their teachings in common crystals rather than grand monuments. Admiral Rodriguez checked her communication systems as reports began arriving from across the galaxy. The transformation was proceeding exactly as the ancient intelligence had predicted. Species that had seemed permanently committed to aggression were beginning to experience the harmonic effects, and many were already reaching out to establish contact with the Cooperative Development Initiative. "What happens now?" she asked. "We've achieved something that no previous civilization managed to accomplish. Do we just continue growing and learning?" Dr. Mitchell's image flickered as she accessed deeper communication channels with the ancient intelligence. "The ancient ones are beginning to share the next level of knowledge techniques for consciousness development that will allow us to eventually join them in the space between galaxies." This was never just about improving galactic civilization. It was preparation for becoming something greater than any individual species could imagine. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibilities that exceeded their current ability to understand. They had taken the first steps toward becoming the kind of advanced intelligence that could guide other galaxies through their own transformations, perpetuating the cycle of growth and development that the ancient ones had maintained for eons beyond counting. But for now, it was enough to know that the galaxy would never again see the kind of destructive competition that had held civilization back for millions of years. What had begun with one human's refusal to accept an alien's insult had become the foundation for a new age of cooperation, understanding, and unlimited potential. The ancient intelligence had finally found worthy students, and the real education was just beginning.